Everyone has either heard of or read a comic book in their lives, but do you know the history behind them? There's a long, complex history behind all comic books, and I'm here to inform you about it. First, we will look at the very beginning of the comic book era, then the rise of comic books in America, or the golden age of comics, and finally, where comic books stand in today's society. First, let's dive in the beginning of the comic book era. The first comic book that was sold on newsstands was actually just a compilation of newspaper clippings of the cartoon section in old newspapers, also known as the funnies. The funnies still are being sold in today's newspapers, with the classics such as Marmaduke and Family Circus still around. The first comic book was called Famous Funnies because, like I said, it was a compilation of the funnies from newspapers throughout that year. But once the ball started rolling on the comic books, the more famous creations were becoming prevalent. The first comic book that was mass published and kickstarted the comic book industry was Superman. The interesting thing about comic books being written and drawn is that the work is very difficult and time consuming, as well as not being paid as much as they should. Also, it was difficult for the creators because the first original comics were rejected many times before finally being published. Superman, which is arguably the most known superhero of all time, was rejected many times before finally being published in 1938. Next, let's look at the rise of the American comic books, also known as the Golden Age. The reason that this era of comics is called the Golden Age of comics is because this was the time period where comic books in America really took off. Comics have been around since the end of the 19th century, but it was really after the Depression that they took off into a major industry that we know and love today. It's hard to pinpoint the exact time at which the Golden Age began, but most believe it was when Superman was first published in 1938. After the Depression, the comic book industry in America changed very rapidly and grew more and more popular as the years went by. One of the biggest reasons for this rapid growth is because of all the wars that were happening at the time. With these wars, such as World War II, it gave comic books a chance to grow by using war propaganda as its driving point. Stories such as Captain America were made through such propaganda. Even the first issue of Captain America depicts him punching Adolf Hitler in the face while wearing the Stars and Stripes. Comic books around this time had a main goal of 1, trying to stay with the current events, and 2, trying to relate to the target audience, which was people from the ages of 9 to 18 years old. You can see the traces of current events throughout the years with comic books such as Captain America battling it out with Hitler himself, or the creation of Wonder Woman to partner with the feminist movement at the time, and all the way to the issue of Superman standing in front of the destroyed Twin Towers, published on September 12, 2001, only one single day after the attack. Keeping up with these events is important for comic book industries to thrive. Finally, let's see where comic books stand in today's society. Comic books have changed greatly and now focus mainly on the cultural aspect of society and stray away from just comedy. The issue of race plays a big factor in today's representation of comics and have in the past as well. In 1947, there was a comic series solely written and drawn for African Americans. This series only lasted 1 issue, which is obviously understandable. Characters nowadays, such as Black Panther, play a very large role in the culture of African Americans in their community. This only came recently, along with a newfound respect and attention of the comic industry, and especially the films based on the comics in the past, which are doing very well. The changes in society heavily affect the market and content of the comic book industry. This is obvious by doing any reading or research. Now you know the beginning of comic books, the rise of comic books, or the Golden Age, and where comic books stand in today's society. The next time you pick up a comic book, you will now know that there is much more of backstory and meaning to the pages.